Hello, friends. Do you want to elevate your cannabis brand or product? Let's get real. Standing out in the cannabis industry isn't a walk in the park. That's where Green Lane Communication comes in. They're not just a cannabis-focused PR firm. They're your partners in getting genuine, valuable coverage, from features in major publications to shoutouts in niche blogs and podcasts. Hey, like this one, Cannabinoid Connect. But Green Lane Communication isn't just about making headlines. They're about building your narrative, crafting messages that speak directly to your audience, and creating robust media strategies that hit the mark. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned player in the cannabis game, they've got the chops to amplify your presence. As we gear up for conference season and head into Q4, there's no better time to boost your brand's trust and credibility. Ready to make waves in the cannabis world? Reach out to Green Lane Communication. Check out their offerings at greenlanecommunication.com or find the link right in our episode description. Let's elevate your cannabis journey together with Green Lane Communication.
3, 2, 1, liftoff.
Cannabinoid Connect, the nation's most diverse cannabis-related podcast.
And we are recording. Kyle, welcome to the podcast, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Never better.
Well, tell me, where are you located?
I'm in Vancouver, Washington. So we're right across the bridge from Portland, Oregon. It's beautiful Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, beautiful out there and great location to be in the legal cannabis industry. I mean, you got the best of both worlds there.
Oh yeah, I know. Southern Oregon is like some of the best outdoor growing and we've got, great places to hike. And so that's one of my favorite things is go backpacking and bring a pack of joints with me.
That's awesome, man. Well, the first thing that I want to talk about, I mean, for those that are listening or watching, Kyle, founder and CEO of RollPros. And, I want to first talk about the major milestone that y'all have just hit, which is that big number, the 30 million joints rolled, which to me is a true testament to innovation. So talk to me a little bit about the journey, of rolling 30 million joints and the significance of this achievement in the industry overall.
Yeah, well, I think personally it's very fulfilling because, at parties and stuff, I was always the guy like hand rolling joints, like people couldn't do it, so they'd come to me. And to think
that becomes a full-time job, or you can become, if you're at a party, I mean, you're kind of just working at that point, right? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, totally. And I kind of worked myself out of a job, creating this machine. But yeah, it's kind of cool because I like to think that, I rolled 30 million joints for, 30 million people to get high. And
right.
That's a really great, personal feeling. And then on top of it, it's the validation that, I created this machine in the garage and it's providing value for customers so much that they're buying, their second and third machine and, watching them grow with me to the point where we've got 30 million joints rolled. That's really cool. I've got this army behind me that, is helping us hit that number. That's great warm fuzzies there.
That's so exciting, man. And you talk about founding, why it's always in a garage, it seems like with these true innovations, with Apple, RollPros in a garage. I mean, so tell me, I know your background is pretty impressive. You come from some major tech giants, such as HP, Georgia Pacific, and from what I read in your background, you also kind of played a key role with Oculus's VR system at Facebook. Is that right? Now Meta.
Yeah, and the stuff that I was working on really was, I think it's still a few years out from actually hitting the market. So I was very deep in the R&D. But yeah, it was a great it was a great project because they have really hard problems, and the hard problem, I love a good problem, like that's, as an engineer, I'm like, I'm always looking for, how can we improve this? And they had these like monumental problems that they're trying to solve. And yeah, so I was working on the AR. So, we're trying to put live action into your own field of view. So like your environment. So I'm just sitting here in my office, and like the Kool-Aid man would bust in through a wall, and I'd have to like blast him, and so like AR is where I was, and that
Right.
tech is still like pretty far off. But I was
Yeah.
able to really help them create a test bed so they could start making the software for the final version.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it was really cool. And but the thing is, it's big business, and so I was like, I wanted to move fast, and I'm like, let's go, let's cut these parts. This is the design. And they're like, no, we got to check with this guy, and this guy's got an agenda, and he doesn't like him because of this deal.
Right.
And it was like
Corporate
frustrating.
politics. Yep.
Yeah. And
No,
so I
I
was
get
like,
it.
yeah, I was like, I got to get out of this. I got to, I want to move fast. So let's get back to the garage.
You're like Ricky Bobby. I want to go fast. Uh, but so like at that point, I mean, did you have a relationship with cannabis? Did you just kind of see this being like an industry where obviously you said you were rolling joints, right, back in college. So did you just kind of think, okay, I want to move fast, and there's this industry that's blazing, with innovation, despite, being federally illegal still, right? And so was that the move?
Yeah, yeah, and I'd used cannabis, since like late in high school, and kind of as like a creative problem solver. I'm always trying to look at things from different perspectives, and I don't go with the normal standard, right? Like I'm always
Hmm.
questioning, like, is that really the best way to do it? And so cannabis kind of provided that extra perspective I needed sometimes on, like, if I'm really working through this problem and I'm like, how are we going to actuate this? I'd come home at the end of the day and I'd roll a joint, and like, man, sometimes it would just pop right in, and
Yep.
so it has always been a companion of mine through the years. Um, and yeah, when I saw the market starting to emerge, I was like, dang, like this is it. There's only a few true like emerging markets in every generation, and I'm like, this is ours, and
Right.
uh, and then I had a very poor experience with a cone. It's supposed to be like, this is like the first legal joint I bought at a store, and it burned hot, canoed, didn't taste
Worst.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was like, all right, we got to fix this,
There goes your problem solving, right? You're like, let me just attack this thing right at the core.
Right. Yeah, and really, as I was looking at the problem, I'm like, oh, this is like, they're fighting physics, trying to like fill a cone with like sticky, fluffy flour, and you're trying to fit it through this little hole, I'm like, just like pure physics and material properties they're going to limit you.
Hmm.
And so that's when I was like, all right. And I went down the rabbit holes of like the cigarette machines, the cigar machines, and nothing was doing it right. And I really think it's because this plant is like so different from anything else. So
For
it
sure.
needed a whole different solution.
Yeah. I mean, in addition to that, like epiphany and those observations, right? Like, and knowing that this is the industry you want to be in, what are some of the skills and insights that you transferred from your previous roles, when founding RollPros?
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely one is, I know a lot of vendors around here. So like, and I still make all of my parts here locally. So I had a friend company that I could go and machine parts in. So that was huge. kind of having local manufacturing resources. And I
Mm-hmm.
still use them today. So like we're still all made in the US, and
Nice.
actually it's all made in Vancouver proper, which is really cool.
That's
Um,
great. Yeah.
yeah. And then yeah, like the high tech side of things, I was realizing everything's getting simpler and smarter. So like my whole first prototype I could build with almost off the shelf components, like all of the brains, like the microprocessors and the LCD touch screens, like you can get all this stuff like just off Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was able to like kind of blend my knowledge of like high tech mechatronics and with just my garage and like available time and space to start creating.
Wow. It seems like just the perfect, I mean, timing is everything, right? I mean, you could have the skill, you could have it all, but if the time doesn't work, that's kind of one thing in itself. So, being in this space, for as long as you've been now, talk to me about the evolution of the pre-roll production process, right? The journey of pre-roll automation and so on.
Yeah, well, the cool thing about the pre-roll in particular is when it started out, it was like we called it the hot dogs of the industry, right? It was like, all right, you got your big fluffy buds in the jars, and then all of your B and C buds and trim would go into the pre-rolls, and now we just, sell those off for cheap, right?
Right.
But now people are starting to shift towards like, well, they realize that the pre-roll is sometimes your first chance, your first look at a new consumer, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're starting to shift towards like, okay, we got to put, good flower in our pre-rolls so that, we can get that consumer. And then maybe they'll buy our flower. And then when that happens, the consumer's like, oh wow, I always get a good joint from this brand and this straight roll. And so then they keep coming back to the joint. And so it's like, once you implement this new technology, it almost like starts eating up like all your other like products. It's like you end up becoming a joint company, and it's like it's pretty cool because that's where tobacco went too.
And you mean so when you give that example, like you become a pre-roll company because of that experience, because of the consistency and just the consumer knowing that they're getting, that quality and that particular burn experience every time.
Right, yeah, and it's like there's a pretty cool case, a company called Benson Arbor, and they're in Southern Oregon. They got a great flower, and they were like a top shelf flower producer forever. And he got one of my first blackbirds. I think he's got three of them now, and he's almost shifted completely over to just doing pre-rolls because the form factor is so consumable, and so his customers they're hooked on it, like they love the convenience, they know it's always a good burn, and he's got great flowers. So it's like he's got the trifecta, and I've seen that happen, more times than not. And it's been a great journey to watch people shift their models as the market changes.
Yeah, I definitely want to dive into how RollPros is innovating, particularly with Blackbird and even DrawCheck. But before I do that, I wanted to ask you, if you could spotlight RollPros contributions when it comes to, the current state of automation and kind of how far, I guess, it's come in the evolution.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what the automations in this industry are, they're getting there. But I think what people realized is you can't just take a piece of ag equipment and or a packaging machine and insert cannabis.
Right.
It's like it definitely requires it requires innovation, and it requires design and test work to to actually come up with something that's going to be consistent, because the flower is pretty inconsistent. It's like there's all these different strains, all these different bud types, and that was one of the things that we tackled head on very early. Was like, all right, we gotta stay in design as much as we can, because next thing we know, there's a new flower that's getting thrown at us, and we're like, wow, I've never seen anything like this. So it's like you got to stay nimble, and you can't just like say, okay, this is what we offer and that's it. It's like you got to be able to be flexible, um, to make sure you're making all your customers happy.
So does that mean that you're like kind of innovating and upgrading as the product gets better, or are you also customizing machines for different use cases?
No, yeah, we're always getting better. Yeah,
Yeah.
um, and that's one of the cool things about the Blackbird is it's got a modular design. And so if there was like an innovation that we had, 6 months after you bought the machine, we could retrofit that onto your machine. And so it's like you don't have this tech that's aging. It's like, well, there's an upgrade that'll get you this new whatever that we just came up with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been really helpful for, yeah, these new strains that come out, or, people are doing infused now, and it's like, you kind of got to tweak some things,
Right.
but now you can do that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Blackbird. I mean, you know, the inception and development. I mean, you mentioned earlier of the garage, right? Is that where Blackbird kind of was incepted and the idea came about?
Yeah, it was, I wanted to find some way to roll a joint better than I could roll by hand. Um, because as you know, rolling a joint by hand is really tough. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
like, this is a hard problem. And like I was looking for that next hard problem. Um, and I remember, you remember those like little like cigarette rollers that have a belt, and
Mm-hmm.
like it's usually made by Top or Zigzag.
Yeah, it's just like the easy way to roll joints if you don't know how to roll them, right? And you just stick
Exactly.
the paper in there, put the yeah. I've seen those.
Yeah, so that's
I've
that's
never
kind of
used
like,
it, but
yeah, and I used to use one of those. I played with one, and I realized that it can make a really consistent joint. You just got to control the tension, or like how tight, you're rolling it.
hmm.
And so I kind of started with that as like my base architecture. Um,
Wow.
and then I just like kind of automated around that. I was like, how can I, put a servo on this, so that the user can control how tightly rolled it is, and like how do I feed paper, and that's where it started.
Wow. And then so from there, you're just kind of tinkering in your garage. I mean, how long was that development process? I would imagine year. I mean,
It was solid. It was probably like a solid like year and a half of like kind of getting the concept figured out. And I remember like my first one was like all 3D printed and like half plywood, and it was like, you could roll a joint, but you had to like, manually move the plat, and then you're turning valves on by hand, and you know
winding it up or
Yeah, exactly. But it's like I do that, and like a perfect joint would pop out, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this has like legs, this could work.
right,
And
right.
and then the next was like, I then when it was like more serious, I had an old project car that, I sold that, and that was kind of like my seed money or whatever to like, order my first round of like real machined parts. And yeah, and then that was putting together the first rough test bed. That was like 2018. And then 2019, I started rolling for a bunch of the CBD farms in Oregon.
Oh yeah, that broke loose at that time, right after the 2018 Farm Bill.
Right, right. And they had a ton of flower, and I was, I wanted to get the runtime on the machine, so I was rolling joints for everybody. And
Yep, getting data, right, figuring out, yeah.
yep, finding all the little, the little wear points, little break points, and little fixes I needed to fix. Um, yeah, and then at the end of 20, yeah, and then I guess 2020, I sold my first machine like in mid 2020, and that was like the real, like, that was the next round of seed money, right? And
Right.
that enabled me to quit my job and
Nice.
like, really go full head first into this thing. Um, just happened to be in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, what better time to start a new venture, right? And just go all in than the pandemic. But it was
Yeah,
kind of, I mean, in a way, it kind of makes sense because it was a restart for a lot of people, whether they were laid off or whatever also. So you took
yeah,
the opportunity to kind of, go after what you want, which, hey,
yeah,
commend
yeah.
you for
That
that.
was yeah. It was a crazy time. A lot of maybe that was, yeah, part of the reason why I felt like it was okay to quit my job and like go off on a limb, is like, well, the rest of the world's going to hell, so
Right, now is the time. That was kind of my mindset with this podcast because I was like, I was worried at the time of like what my network would think, like the work network, because I have
yeah,
this cannabis podcast, and you're in the cannabis closet. But I said the same thing. I was like, fuck it. It like that's so bad right now. Like I don't think anyone cares. So it kind of helped me also nudge me a bit. But
totally. Yeah, it's
well,
great. Like, love it.
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, I think that's another cool thing that I love about the cannabis industry is like so many people are potheads. Like so many like really smart, really intelligent, highly motivated, entrepreneur spirits, CEOs, like they're potheads, and it's like I remember when I came out, came out, right? Like came out of the closet, like like, you
It's
know,
like that though. It is. It's like, yeah, it's a
and
big deal at the time.
right, and like, I'm like a clean cut engineer working with all these, highfalutin, managers, and I
Coming
got
into work
kids.
high every day.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't say that, but
No, I'm kidding.
but
The
yeah, it's
trick
like
is you got to be high all the time so that if you're not, people think, what's going on with him? Why he's acting different, you know?
right, right. Yeah, but I've met a lot of like really cool people that are, and kind of in the same like millennial demographics, that were like, man, I'm just like hitting the top of my limits with these corporate jobs. And it's like, I need to get out and make a name for myself. And the cannabis market did that for so many people, yourself
Yep.
included, that
Yep.
it's so
100%.
cool. So cool to
It's
see.
It's so cool. And I could not agree more with you in the sense that, like, yeah, there are potheads. They like to consume, but they're smart and they're hardworking people and they're
Right.
resilient. That's
Right.
what I kind of think in a way our generation, millennials, are more resilient than other generations just because, and I don't want to talk about the older generation. They went through a lot also with, different wars and everything, but we've lived through a lot of tragedies in our time as well. And I feel like in a way, at least for me, you get a bit, which is sad to say, but you get blasé to a lot of things, right? And you just kind of, so this is an opportunity. This industry provides that kind of chance, to, like you said, make a name for yourself, do something. And part of it is because the federal government doesn't acknowledge it because it's illegal. So there's a lot that you can kind of do at this time. It's kind of an oxymoron because you can't, right, with all other regulations and whatnot. But no, man, I agree. I digress. I want to get back to the technology of RollPros and its impact in terms of quality, consistency, and production efficiency since it's been, released first sale in 2020.
Yeah. So the machine itself is, it's only getting better over time. Like my engineers always finding new little ways to shave, more time off the cycle time, so it's faster. And we recently had a customer hit. They rolled 100,000 joints in a week.
What?
Yeah, and it's like, so these machines are just getting better and better, and like it really is helping with these brands that where they hit the limit at scale where it's like, well, I can't hire more people to get more out. And so that's a huge thing with automation, right? Is now you're getting true efficiencies through tooling and technology. And the cool thing about the Blackbird specifically is we're mechanically compressing the joint radially, so you're able to control that draw. Whereas like a cone, you're just kind of like shaking the flower and you're like, I hope that doesn't clog up, or I hope that is a good draw. Where our machine, you can dial it in so it's just the right draw. And then that's where the draw check comes in, is because I was having people roll and I was like, like puff on it a little bit, make sure it's got the right airflow that you want. But that's like very subjective and qualitative.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. And so the draw check was pretty like, it was like a little light bulb went off. It was like, all right, we just need a way to like get a number on, what's the vacuum drop across the joint. And that's what the draw check is. And so, operators setting up the machine and they, do a quick draw check on the first couple joints. If it's too loose, if it's under 30, millimeters of water, then you can adjust it. So yeah.
It's basically a measurement tool is what you're saying. It's just part of the Blackbird rolling process. So before they would use the Blackbird to roll the joints, you've got draw check to make sure. I mean, after a couple or whatever, you kind of say, okay, this is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
The draw is super important, man. It really is, because like there's so many factors to a bad shitty joint, right? There's like it doesn't pull and it's too, or it's too loose where it's canoeing and it's just not hitting evenly. Yeah, so that's pretty awesome that you guys are tackling those issues. You mentioned the one example of like 100,000 joints being rolled with Blackbird in a week. Is there any other real world applications or feedback from customers that are utilizing the machine?
I mean, the number one thing is just the quality of the burn, and it's being able to run like fresh flower, like fresh high moisture content, like well cured flower. Because it's kind of like, when you're trying to fill a cone and, you're talking about like too loose, it does this, too dense, it does this. The only really parameters you have is to change the material. So like you can either grind it super fine or like your flour. And so you can grind it super fine or you can dry it out. But like both of those things are detrimental to the quality.
Lessen the quality, right?
Yeah, and
you're losing.
Right, and so that was like, I want to be able to roll like the fresh, sticky, the good shit, and so that's I designed the machine like around that. It's like make sure that it can run fresh, sticky flour first, like that's number one. And then the speed came second. Like I was like, I want to make highest quality joint. I don't care if it only does like, 50 an hour. And then we just, then it just got faster and faster and faster. And, now it clocks at right around like 1,000 per hour. And um, yeah, and people are doing some crazy things with it. It's really cool.
That's awesome, man. To just kind of see it's like your baby. You know what I mean? Like you've seen it all the way through ideation, conception to actual like sales and becoming like a company now, and it's amazing, man. And it's
Yeah.
obvious that RollPros is elevating cannabis businesses with automation. So, is there any other case studies or testimonials of businesses that have benefited from the machine? And then, do you want to talk about, as we wrap up, future plans and what RollPros is focused on in the future?
Yeah, we definitely have a few white papers on our website, and it's around the quality, like it's the thing that a lot of people miss is, it's not all about, volume and numbers getting out the door. It's about quality joints and then creating quality joints efficiently, like,
Right.
but the quality is first. Like that's always first.
It has
Um,
to be. Yeah.
yeah, right. And you spend all this time pheno hunting, it's like you do a lot of work to get this perfect flower. It's like it better show in the joint. And so yeah, like the Benson Arbor guys, Rebel Spirit, they've got another great brand. They're in Central Oregon. Um, and then there's some East Coast companies like the Clear. They've got a really cool infused product. So they're running, I think it's got like blueberry terps and also, yeah, just like distillate oil.
Nice.
But they're doing big stuff too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, what are you all focused on in the future? I mean, what else is of major plans and what's on the roadmap?
I think we're always improving the Blackbird, so that's we're that's kind of like an ever evolving machine. And then we're looking into like the blunts too, so that'll be probably sometime next year we'll have like a blunt machine. Just because of like how we're rolling, we're kind of set up for it. Um, and then
Blunts. That seems like an untapped category. I haven't really seen machines that focus on joints. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean that's pretty cool. That could be a good differentiator.
yeah, and it's I don't imagine it being like a crazy seller, but like I really want to cater to my connoisseur customers, and those are usually the guys that are smoking blunts, and like
Right.
it just seems like you know I got to make something for them because they're the heavy users, and they're usually um like the rappers and stuff, like like do
They
it for
got the
them.
bands. They got they're throwing that money around. No,
Yeah.
that's awesome, man. Kyle, I've really enjoyed talking with you today and learning more about RollPros and the innovation and the impact that you're making within the industry as it relates to automation. And so virtual handshake. But is there anything you want to leave the audience with before we wrap up?
Yeah, just, check us out on, rollpros.com, and, you can get in touch with any of us. You can reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. We'll be at MJ Biz this year. Uh, yeah, and, if you just want to sample a product too, like hit me up and we'll send you to a couple dispensaries and some joints to try. But yeah, I think, yeah, thanks for having me on. And I love your story too. It's like we're both in the same emerging market and we're building these companies around us. And it was a great interview, and I had a great time.
Hey man, the pleasure was all mine. And yeah, we're very fortunate to be in this space. And it's great. It's great to have experts like you on that are just talking about, how you're making an impact and innovating and moving this industry forward. So Kyle, appreciate everything you're doing. And Yeah, let's have you back on soon, man. All right.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
All right. And thank you all for listening. Bye.
Cannabinoid Connect, the nation's most diverse cannabis related podcast.